The title of today's hearing is about the EPA mismanagement. This is the second hearing we've had. We had one back in April. And once again, we find ourselves at a hearing examining the management failures at the EPA. Allegations before us today are disturbing and sound strikingly similar to a hearing this committee held just a few months ago. In April, we discussed Peter Jutro, the former EPA manager who had a history of serial harassment. Mr. Jutro harassed at least 16 women, with 13 of them filing formal complaints of misconduct to management. These reports unfortunately fell on deaf ears. In fact, EPA leadership continued to promote Mr. Jutro even though he continued to harass his female coworkers. The EPA Office of Inspector General launched an investigation in August of 2014 into alleged acts of sexual harassment by Peter Jutro. During the course of its investigation, the EPA OIG corroborated the sexual harassment of a 21-year-old female intern at the Smithsonian and uncovered other allegations of Jutro's sexual harassment of female EPA employees throughout his 31-year career at the agency. Senior officials at the EPA may have known about Mr. Jutro's prior misconduct prior to the intern incident, but it did not take necessary steps to corroborate that information while promoting him to the acting associate administrator position in February of 2014. They failed to contact Mr. Jutro's direct supervisor, who knew of the allegations against Mr. Jutro and verbally counseled him on multiple occasions for inappropriate behavior. When the EPA Inspector General attempted to interview Mr. Jutro a second time, the agency allowed Mr. Jutro to retire, blocking the OIG from pursuing the investigation further. The deep concern here is that people are going to do stupid things. Okay? That's going to happen. We're a very forgiving society. But when you have somebody who repeats this behavior that is absolutely and totally unacceptable and does so time and time again, there need to be consequences, not promotions. And it is of deep concern to this committee, to this Congress, on both sides of the aisle, that when these things are brought forward, that they're dealt with. The situation here we're dealing with here today is another very unfortunate situation, to say the least, of a young woman who is harassed, and then it was compounded by the fact that the people who were trying to investigate it and hold people accountable were retaliated against. So today we are discussing new allegations of sexual harassment along with employee retaliation in EPA's Region 5 Chicago office. Sadly, this incident is almost identical to the Jutro situation. Here, a 24-year-old research fellow is the victim of a sexual harassment by a 62-year-old employee by the name of Paul Bertram. The victim in this case, and I would admonish our members here and the people that are on the panel today, we do not want to refer to this victim by name. She deserves our utmost respect. I do not want you to use her name. Call her the victim, intern X, but we are not to use her name in this hearing here today. We're trying to protect her identity. She deserves better in her young career as she's starting forward. But in her statement, when she put forward what she went through, the way she described it is there was inappropriate, this perpetrator, Mr. Paul Bertram, inappropriately hugged her, rubbed her back, grabbed her, rubbed her hands, touched her knees, kissed her, made suggestive comments, and engaged in unsolicited physical and verbal contact. This happened countless times over a period of years. The consequence, they moved the 62-year-old's cubicle. That was one of the consequences. Unfortunately, he had a history of this. This was not just the first time. This was not just an isolated incident. What we're going to hear today is that this had happened several times before. And when it happens, you've got to deal with it and protect, in this case, the young women in the office because it creates such a toxic environment. The overwhelming majority of people at the EPA, the overwhelming majority of people that work in our federal government, they're good, honest, decent people. They don't do this. But it taints the whole atmosphere. In fact, one of the most toxic environments we have is at the EPA. How ironic. The mission of the EPA is to protect the environment, protect the people. The problem is the EPA doesn't protect its own employees. And we've got good people here today who are in a position to do something about it. They did their work, but then they were retaliated against. That only compounds it and makes it worse. Our witnesses today believe the EPA management in Chicago retaliated against the employees who investigated the victims' accusations of sexual harassment. 3 of these employees are testifying today. 3 of them. This is not just one person saying, oh, I was singled out. 3 of them. And there are more. I applaud them for being brave enough to come before this committee today and to tell their story. Other employees have submitted written testimony, and one passage from Ms. Deborah Lamberti, I hope I pronounced her name properly, is a perfect example of what these employees are facing, but it's so fundamentally wrong at every level. And I read from what she wrote, quote, "Retaliation isn't always loud and full of itself. It can be quiet and chilling, the soul-crushing kind, the kind that leaves you alone in your cubicle in tears in the middle of the day." That is so wrong. We would be deficient in our jobs if we didn't highlight this. We're here to help solve this. We're oversight, but we're also government reform. And if we have to keep doing this, we're going to keep doing it. But if we don't shine a light on it, it isn't going to get solved. Something is wrong when multiple employees come to Congress and attempt to get attention of the EPA management. I would like to enter into the record, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from the National Treasury Employees Union, somebody I don't always agree with. On July 1st of 2015, they wrote this letter to myself and Mr. Cummings, the ranking member. I'll read one sentence from it. "Our trust and confidence in the EPA leadership has sunk to an abysmal level, and we respectfully submit to you that more remains to be done in order to correct this unacceptable situation." End quote. I ask unanimous consent to enter this into the record. Without objection, so ordered. Thank you. High-performing employees, people who are optimistic about their country, passionate about their work, concerned about their environment, trying to do a patriotic job, earn a living, and support their family. It is so discouraging when they see management rewarded for bad behavior and ignoring clear signs of misconduct. Like I said, this is not common. It's not regular. But when it does happen, every red flashing light in the building better go off at every level in Washington, D.C., in Chicago, and other places. And there can never be the retaliation like we are about to hear today. Again, I want to be careful about the treatment of this young woman. Please refrain from using her name. But I look forward to having this hearing here today, and now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.